but too large to rightfully be called a sword. It was larger, thicker, heavier, and cruder than any normal blade. By all accounts, it was no more than a hulking mass of iron.
Doc, halflings are people too. Hello, and welcome to another episode of what's this place called again? I can't remember.
This is the elemental plane of insanity.
Oh wow, big stretch. I was going to say DumpStat.
Oh, that's right. Of course.
I am Brill, the lich of this land, and of course, next to me is the level 12 fighter who will inevitably slay me. Don't trip over your words. You can do this, Brill. Doc, hello. Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
How's that going? Still recovering from that feeble mind spell that hit you earlier? It's
Yes. I actually like to think there's a juicer of feeble mind that every morning I get up and I'm like, I'm going to drink this dumb bitch juice, and I just chug it. And then I try to record, which is great.
Isn't that just Tito's vodka? It's just
You know, here's the worst part. I feel like between the two of us, I feel like one of us would definitely have some interesting stories about Tito's. At least I know I can. I don't know how much you drink now. I think it's a little bit more than when I first met you.
Well, just in the certain realm in which I exist in, Tito's is nowhere to be found. But I used to have Tito's, and I actually really loved mixing Tito's with different drinks and things. I would get Grey Goose vodka as well. And the two different vodkas I'd use in different sort of mixes and collaborations of drinks. And I liked using each one for different concoctions that I made. But yeah, I really like Tito's. It's a great. I'm not one to drink it straight, but I love mixing it with things.
You're like a youth pastor talking about your favorite boozes. You're like, hey kids, after dodgeball and before we praise Christ, I want to talk to you about my favorite concoction. Wait. I just love the fact you also said it in the most Doc way possible, which is concoctions, as though you're building a potion together.
Well, isn't that it? That's what it is. It's a concoction.
It is fun. I mean, it is absolutely a form of poison that will do different effects to you.
Yeah.
I mean,
gotta level up my alchemy.
I think that's absolutely part of the deal with it. I have a few housekeeping things I want to get into.
Yeah.
If you're done with your bartending mixology 101.
Sure. I'll just set the mixer down over here.
Something that we've learned recently is apparently we have a YouTube. And that YouTube has people on it who like us, and we wanted to shout out, hi, check us out on YouTube. Because shut up. Because our Editor Goblin came up to us the other night and he's like, hey, we started a YouTube and we've been promoting everything else. And our YouTube is kind of flourishing with some really sweet people. And they have left the nicest comments on which is so bizarre.
YouTube is such a toxic and vitriolic place, and the people that follow us on YouTube are so nice.
I know.
It's wild.
It's wild because what's hilarious.
I cherish these people.
I do. I mean, they said the nicest
chaotic,
things.
good people that exist on YouTube.
I find it hilarious just because I think the reason why we kind of just we're like, we'll just post on YouTube and just not check. For a long period of time, and then we looked back and there's all these sweet people singing Kumbaya, and we're like, oh my god, how are these people so sweet? So besides Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all that good shit, Spotify, of course, iTunes, we are on YouTube. And we promise we'll be uploading more, and we will actually be part of this community as actual sovereigns, which is I just think it's so funny that our goblin was just like, can you guys, did you see these like really sweet people that we have been actively ignoring? And I'm like, oh my god.
Well, here's the thing, I didn't even know we had a YouTube channel, right? Like I was like, wait, there's a YouTube channel? Wait, there's people following us on YouTube? Wait, they're nice? Like,
oh my god.
Alternate reality. This was not on my 2020 bingo.
It's great. 2020 bingo. Oh my god. That's always great when you get the bingo sheet and on it is murder hornets and collapse of society. But I think it's hilarious too, just when I looked at it and I'm like, oh, these are such sweet people. I'm kind of with you. I kind of forgot we had one. I think I approved it.
I never knew. I straight up did not know.
I think when the goblin put it across my desk, I think I lazily like stamped it.
Hey, listen, I know we rip on the goblin like here, but I love that goblin. Like, holy crap. We there's so much our editing goblin does. And so editing goblin.
I like that goblin.
That's a nice goblin. So thank you, Goblin, for all of the wonderful work you do. And I mean, if you guys want to leave a nice comment and stuff and you like our stuff, that's fine and great. And I'm glad that you like Brill and I, but listen, the editing goblin does so much stuff for this podcast and makes it awesome. So give him a shout out too.
The drop the intelligence part is between the two of us.
Yes.
All this other amazing, wondrous stuff you can find is him.
Yeah.
I love you guys.
The only other thing I wanted to talk about, besides the fact that, you know, we have an entire platform, which is incredible, is Mrs. Lich, my lovely lady. Y'all have been talking about Pokemon Go, and she's been really excited about it to the point where she wants me to release you and for all of us to have a Pokemon Go retreat. So this is your final warning. Talk to my girlfriend again about Pokemon Go, and I will take your phylactery. I'll take your soul into my phylactery.
I thought that was already happening.
Oh, well, now it is.
Oh.
She did message me. She's like, she messaged me. She goes, I can't believe you never told me that Doc likes Pokemon.
Is that what she sounds like?
That is absolutely what she sounds like.
To you?
And then she killed me, which brings us into the topic.
Oh, yes.
Bam. Look at that. That was a perfect segue.
Yeah, it was an absolutely amazing segue. This topic comes from the Facebook group, D&D Bedtime Stories. We appreciate the little community there. You'll see us around a little bit. But I saw a thread and a lot of people commented on it, and I wanted to just bring it to discussion. This question got posted by Pernille, so thanks, Pernille. I see lots of posts about Murder Hobo players. Is it really such a big problem? I've never had anyone with that playstyle and would simply question if my game was right for them if they started. Which I think is a good question, right?
Right.
Partially, one, what's the deal with Murder Hobos?
What's the deal with Murder Hobos?
Right. And then two, the what's with their play style and can it fit with my game? Should it fit with my game?
Right. No, that's a very interesting dilemma. And I think the first thing we should tackle is, are there that many? Oh, well, actually, we should tackle what it is and then how many are there?
Right.
And it's exactly what it sounds like. A person who is a Murder Hobo player is a person who plays a character that's probably on some form of chaotic, right?
Yeah.
And they wander into a town, and the first NPCs they see or they deal with, they interact with that NPC violently, probably ending in murder. So essentially, there's a person that blew into town and just started killing people, aka a Murder Hobo.
Yep.
It's a pretty simple term, but it can somehow encapsulate a wide range of not only play styles, but in my opinion, insults. I think that when you are that or considered to be that, it's kind of one of those big no-nos of D&D in a weird way, because you have people who want to keep the role playing going. And if you just start sexually harassing or murdering every NPC you come across, well, that literally shuts the story down. Could you imagine if in Harry Potter, under the stairs, he just came out and knifed Dudley and the rest of the Dursleys, and then Hagrid showed up and he glocked him? Like, there's no story there. It's just a kid who's deranged, who's British, killing people. Right. And while Harry Potter and the Six Homicides would be a very interesting book to read, I don't think it would be all that long. As a matter of fact, it would probably be a cautionary tale. So there's that ideal of, well, where's the line between that and a regular chaotic character, and why would people want to play this, and how many are there? But just on the basis of, I personally think that play style is not only something to contend with, but I do think there are a few out there, maybe not as many as we like to promote through meme culture.
Sure.
But I do think there are I've met them. Yeah. That's what it boils down to. I've met that guy. So I'm not going to say that they're not out there. I am going to say, however, that I think we do, like everything in our society, we make it sound like a huge problem that's everywhere and just constantly crushing us and ruining games, which is not necessarily true, but to pretend that this isn't an issue when it happens to your game is silly.
Yeah.
What are your stances on how I just defined it?
Here's my feeling about murder hobos. You're absolutely right. They exist. They play the game. They're out there. And the murder hobos that I interacted with were not just like, oh, there's a person, let me kill them. It was often like, hey, let me talk to this NPC. Yep, good. Yep, I bought stuff from you. Yep, cool. All right, I murder them and take back all of my money. And there's a couple of things with this, right? Because I think the gut reaction to murder hobos is, why would you play the game like this? You're stupid, you're dumb, you're, not letting other people have fun, you're ruining the game, right? And I disagree with that.
Okay.
But I also am not an advocate for murder hoboing. I don't think you should murder hobo unless if it's like, hey guys, what if we were all murder hobos and the DM was prepared for us to be murder hobos?
Right.
That's fine, right? But that's also a different story.
It absolutely is. And I agree with you in the fact that very rarely is it kind of exactly what I just said with Harry, deciding to decapitate Dudley with no provocation. Right. Usually it's a dialogue tree, and that dialogue tree, we'll say 85% of the time ends with someone being in the fucking ground.
Yeah.
So I think that is the weird line, because when it's like any time you claim a bad thing to another person, the proof is always true but weird, right? You point out that a person is doing something bad, right? And that person might be able to absolutely say their side pretty easily. Mm-hmm. I wanted my money back. I have this sword. He's a flesh balloon. I stabbed the flesh balloon. I get my money back. What's the problem? Yeah. This is a game. They might be able to explain their side very well to why they did it, but the optics just looking in might very well still be, hey, you done diddly murdered, so stop it.
Right.
I do want to point out that weird impulse to just bring harm upon NPCs, I don't think is just murdering. I'll give an example later that isn't a murder hobo thing per se, in the sense that it was murder, but it still was absolutely under that strange umbrella of impulsivity.
This is an interesting thing for me, right? Because I think murder hobos, there's often an idea that goes with being a murder hobo. And some of these ideas are, I want to spice up the game and make it interesting. Because obviously murdering someone to death is very shocking and will shake things up very practically. There's also the idea that's very video gamey. Why is Grand Theft Auto fun? With Grand Theft Auto, you run around, you have, guns, and you can buy ammo super easily. You go on a shooting spree, you kill a bunch of cops, you die, and you respawn with all of your stuff, and you just go off and do it again. Grand Theft Auto isn't very fun when you're like, oh, I'm going to hold up a gas station. It's like, yay, I'm holding up a gas station. When you're driving down the highway and mowing down a bunch of people, it's a power trip, right? And I think that there's a little bit of that crosses over where it's like, oh, if you just like murder people without consequence, that's a little bit of a power trip. You know, it sounds very sick.
I think it's more than a little bit of a power trip.
It's very much so a power trip.
I'd almost argue that's the definition, but
Power trip.
But what you're touching on, though, I feel like is the weird bit of the actual game, which is this marriage between storytelling and the actual wargaming side from which this thing has emerged from. Because encounters are a part of the game. Making a monster fight people, the violence of the world. Violence is a fundamental part of the game. So I can see people see that violence and go, well, I did that violence. What's the problem? And it's basically saying I'm going to marry one side of the game instead of the other. And this is part of the weird bit of the actual tabletop scene where you will have people who go, I want encounters. And then you'll have people that go, I want lore. I want to do the storytelling thing. I want the hero's journey. And that means a lot of dialogue. But then there's that weird part where you have people who kind of get into these weird extreme camps. And I'm not saying it's a binary. It's much more of a spectrum. But you have people who will lean really heavy into the role playing where they find combat trivial. And the critique to them is, well, why? Why are you playing a game that is partly combat focused? Why don't you just, write a play, and dress up with your friends? And on the flip side of that, for people who just want to murder, it's like, well, there's other games for that. Like play Strategio or whatever. Fucking play Monopoly. I don't know.
Play Risk.
Play Risk. Yeah.
War.
Warhammer 40K or something. Actually, I shouldn't say that because I did recently get into the lore and it is deep. But but there are games where you can basically turn your brain off and do the murder thing. A video game would be fine for that. So there's that weird bit of, well, why are you in this to only do one thing and only sample one fruit of this beautiful thing we have? And it's usually related to the person's overall personality. I know people who are just author nerds who disgust me with how they're trying to promote new books and talk all the time about character arcs, and they're so annoying. And all they want to do is play funny characters and make extreme voices and get deep into the scene, and they're actors.
Oh gosh, I know exactly who you're talking about.
I know a few people like that. And then you have the other people who will not make a voice. They barely make a name. Their backstory is a sentence, and long story short, they've got a sword. And they've got a sword, and they want to make sure they want to have combat, and that can lead into power gaming and maybe meta knowledge or what have. But murder hoboing is that weird bit of. There's a little bit of that role play aspect because you're chaotic, you're crazy, right? That's part of it. You're a lunatic and you want to be like the Joker. And then there's the other part where you want to do that power trip in combat, but not necessarily against monsters, mostly against like Farmer Joe with his fucking family.
Well, here's the thing, though, that I got. It's something that you said, and I got kind of hooked on it, and I can't let it escape my brain. So I'm just going to say it. You mentioned how like a part of it is like the personality of the players, and like I agree that there's definitely people that are playing Dungeons and Dragons that like want to be murder hobos, right? And that's kind of like the thing that they get fun out of in the game.
They get off on it.
Sure. But if you think back to like how Dungeons and Dragons was played like originally, where it's like, hey, here's a dungeon. It's got a bunch of things that you have to kill in it. Go kill them. Like,
oh yeah, no, the OG war game.
Yeah, like fake a basic personality for your character and some motives that you're in these places and just go kill everything that's in this cave. Really, I think 5th edition is kind of interesting because you have a lot of people that say, This is a game about storytelling. This is a game with a little bit of combat in it, but it's mostly about creating that story together. But its roots really are in that violence. And I think that honestly, being a murder hobo is OG. Like being
A bit.
And while that may not fit the exact playstyle that a lot of people are going for with 5th edition, I think that you have to at least acknowledge when there's a murder hobo in the mix that like, hey, this is kind of like part of how the game was designed and played.
Oh, originally, sure. And I do think you need to put that more in historical context a bit, because it isn't there was advanced D&D and now there's 5e, right? There was 3.5, which had huge story elements and was a mechanical marvel of its own. And then you had 4th edition, which had a ton of heavy stuff on story, but also very video gaming mechanics. Where I could definitely see a lot of murder hobos come from that slime pit. So you suddenly have this, when you look at the grand scheme of the actual timeline, I agree that there is that OG combativeness between players and DM way back a day. Rock falls, everybody dies.
Right.
It's that the DM isn't really your friend. Back in the day. Now we have Matt Mercer and we hug him and we kiss him and we love him so much. But way back in the day, Gary was not your friend. He just wasn't. Mr. Gygax was honestly trying to kill you sometimes.
And I even have heard stories that I'm not sure if Gary, but like some DMs in that day would actually near the table would put up like a bed sheet and like sit behind it. So like the DM was almost literally like just this figure, this narrator, and it was the dungeon versus the players, right? It was not, oh, the DM that we can see and he's friendly and he's traded this thing for us.
He's got a face.
It's a voice, right? And it is the dungeon, right? The DM is.
It is truly a Sidorak.
Right. And so I think like you're right. There's a contrast there between like what is original Dungeons and Dragons and then what's happening in current day. And while murder hobos may be more acceptable in like a classically played game of D&D, they definitely have a lot more of a harder time fitting into a modern day Dungeons and Dragons game if you just walked up and sat down at any random 5e table today.
Right. And it's not only, I guess, that sort of aggressiveness, but it's also the fact that on a meta standpoint, do you really want to be that guy? Like, I know that there are parties that are just murder hobos, right? And as you said, if the DM wants you just to go buck wild on every town and just burn it down or have fun or do something along those lines, great, fine, cool, right?
Right.
But just given by the fact that so many people have been introduced to D&D right now through storytelling, I'm looking at Critical Role, D&D is for Nerds, Harmon Quest. There's all these different big media companies that have produced things for this game, and they are built on story. And story is something that I feel is a big allure to the actual players of the game. So now you have people who are probably going to be the minority.
Sure.
And if you want to be wacky hijinks, stab the old woman, terrible, but you can be, but you might butt heads with other players if you don't communicate that well, right?
Right.
There's that weird back and forth pushback that you can have. So I, for one, think that there needs to be kind of this upfront acknowledgement, maybe not even as a put down, but just to come forward and say, hey, murder hobos exist and we're going to have to deal with them and we're going to have to talk with them. And if that means having a very uncomfortable conversation about how you just killing the main quest giver made everybody really upset, is another, it's a big issue because that can lead to PvP. And I know some people really like PvP, player versus player. I have learned, especially in the last 2-3 years, that when you have people who have split their soul to create a new character whom they love and they are playing against another person, it is very hard to separate the ego. And then all of a sudden you have players fighting players who will hate one another. It gets intense.
I've been really fortunate in having very limited PvP encounters the one situation that one of those PvP encounters happened is actually like from a situation that one of the characters, actually one of the book author people that you were kind of talking about earlier, had a character that killed an NPC because of a kind of psychotic breakdown that they had. And all the other party members reasonably went, holy crap, he's gone insane and he's killing people. We have to kill him. And they did. And he was perfectly fine with that.
Right.
But I also know situations where, it's like, oh, well, like I killed a shop, keeper. And then it's like, dude, that's not cool. You can't do that. And then it's like, but it's what I would do, yada, yada. People get hurt, their characters die. And there's a lot of tension at that table now where there could have been a conversation, right? There could have been a situation where the DM said, guys, hang on, like, let's talk about the type of game that we want to play.
And it's not just that, though. It's the fact that I agree that those situations can happen where people are fine. And I bet there's even people listening like, hey, Brill, that's really immature. Why do you think people can't separate themselves from the actual character they're playing? But people put work into these things.
Yeah.
And it's not immature or mature to say that you might have certain feelings for the things you made.
Yeah.
You might get upset and you might put on a brave face and you might be able to still hang out with that person and be fine and realize it is just a game, but there's still maybe resentment, maybe an issue, maybe a wound, and bottling that up and not talking about it isn't wise. It's just not.
Yeah.
So you need to go forward and say, hey man, you killing that shopkeeper for no reason other than you couldn't get a good deal on some boots has really split up the party. And and not to mention, you're going to get people who play characters differently from you. And there are a lot of people who just want to play good heroes. They want to just be the Legolas. What happens when you have a Lord of the Rings style party and in the middle of it is the Joker, is like Harley Quinn, just fucking murking people left and right. And every king they talk to about Arendelle and taking the knee, and they're like, oh, my lord, yes, we will go on this journey and heal the divide within the land. Stab, 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 stab.
It's just like, yep.
That's terrible. And it not only hurts their play style, but it can also mean that Gimli one night will look to Legolas and just be like, how about we fucking murk him in his sleep? And then the other player is going to be like, why would you do that? I'm playing my character correctly. And then there's this there's this sudden divide. And people may say that that's weird, but that's kind of how the dominoes set up. It's really easy looking down the road to see where something's going. Yep. And to pretend that you don't see where something's going is a little bit short-sighted and a little bit rude on your end to just ignore what's happening within your party. Yep. So murder hobos, if you are a murder hobo, first of all, it's hard to admit you are one, but let's say some of the things you're hearing in this episode may make you think, hey, I exhibit those symptoms. How about you talk to your party? Be like, hey, last week when I slew that nursing home, was that okay? And when they shake their heads no and cry a little bit, you go, oh, should I change? Or should I go to a different party? Or should we work this out so that I can get my homicidal rage out when I need to? Yep. And they'll go, and they'll shake more and start crying more. But you get it. You can have that dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think definitely if you're the player that's a murder hobo, right, and you're listening to this and you're like, am I a murder hobo? Looking at your hands that are covered in blood. And yeah, exactly. Definitely talking to your DM and talking to your party is like a good step. Because you know what? You might be a murder hobo and the other people in your party might think it's fine, right?
Right.
And great. If that's the case and your DM is on board too, please don't kill me, government. I'm just talking about a podcast and a game. Murder all the people you want.
Right. Absolutely. Dahmer, beat his numbers, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get out there.
God.
Absolutely. Ted Bundy, you got to beat that high score.
Oh, man.
You approve of this, Doc. You mentioned it.
Oh, gosh. I'm too lawful good for this.
Should we jump back to talk about Tito's?
Yeah, let's do that. Tito's not sponsor for this episode. But here's the thing, right? You might be the DM of a game. Your players may unfortunately not listen to this podcast, and you may be dealing with a murder hobo at your table. I think there's a lot of tendency for DMs to look at a murder hobo and say, like, oh, he's such a problem player. I wish he wasn't playing like this and all this other stuff. And I find often that a little bit of communication, great, this word again, from the DM to that player and to the group as a whole usually can help resolve the situation from being less murder hobo-y.
Absolutely.
Example, I've had a murder hobo in my group who was bored. He joined in with a bunch of friends because he heard D&D was a lot of fun, created a character that he thought was going to be exciting and fun to play and was going to be able to, hurt lots of goblins and people. There was a decent amount of role-playing going on, and he wasn't prepared for that. And so his kind of resolution to kind of like fix that was to make it interesting by getting into fights with guards and, killing random people and stuff like that. So here's the deal. Should he have just gone off and started randomly killing people? Probably not. Just like any normal citizen probably should not go off and randomly kill people when they're bored, right? Was that a failure to communicate the expectations of what the game was? Yes, that is my bad, right? That's my bad for not really explaining, like, hey, this is kind of like the type of game that I'm going for. This is kind of the play style that we're going to be doing. And it's my bad to not say what you guys expect and want out of a game. Because here's the thing. One guy was like, I'm kind of good with whatever. And two other people really wanted like a heavier roleplay experience. And the murder hobo wanted a really combat heavy experience, right? He had seen the combat and stuff like that, and he thought that that was going to be a lot of fun. Granted, it's a lot of fun to do combat in Dungeons & Dragons, but when we started doing all this role playing, he felt left out and he felt bored by it. And it was kind of like a symptom of that. So we ended up being able to shift some things around. This guy ended up joining a different group that was more combat heavy and promised to have like 1 or 2 combats per night when we played, and was more so just like a combat game and less of a story game.
Okay.
He had a blast, right? And even when it came to the role-playing segments in that campaign, he wasn't murder hoboing people because like his taste for blood and, a reasonable expectation for that game was met, and it was fine.
He knew there were kobolds coming, that he could absolutely end their lineages.
Yeah.
What you did there, though, in that story, I feel is a better way to handle things. So I know last week in our Power Gamers thing, I mentioned that you should be able to talk to your player, but you should also be able to just maintain the fact that you, as the head of this game in a weird way, as the DM, should be able to handle any combat by just fixing things and tweaking things and adding things and making sure that you can actually make an encounter. I don't like DMs who kind of cower from players just because you need to learn that spontaneity. You need to make sure that you are able to get something finished. You're able to do whatever you want in game. So you have the ability to change the very atmosphere, the planet that they walk on. Why are you scared of one man? So on that level, I think there's a way to handle players where if someone's just min-max, well, you up the encounter a little bit. You do a few more traps, maybe some poison, man. Get into it. But on the flip side, I do think there is that weird inclination that when you have a quote-unquote bad player or some kind of murder hobo, that people have this idea to just handle it in-game, which is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
To just murk a player or just kill them or cut them off, I find to be it's a very passive aggressive way to handle a problem. I've seen that happen a lot, and I'll even admit to the fact that when I first started DMing, I did it once, and I didn't exactly kill a player, but I was able to separate them, and my party was happy because it was the problem player, but the player was like, he felt singled out. And you try to get around that by saying, no, you weren't singled out. But it's clear, when the universe is working against someone and the universe has a name, and that name is like Steve, it's easy to blame who it is. Like, it's really easy to point the finger at somebody and said, you let this happen, because there is actually a person in this case.
Right.
So I think that kind of idea of, well, I can just, maybe make sure that goblin stabs him, and you might get away with it. But the problem is it might look a little shady. You might have rolled too many crits in a row, or it's hard to imagine it not going well. And then I know other DMs who go, well, I'll just have consequences. So you kill somebody in the town square, and you send like 100 guards, and one of the guards is a Taras dressed up in like Whiterun armor. Like, it looks ridiculous. And that player will just go, oh, well, this isn't fun. I had consequences, because you're not addressing what they want in fun. And I know some DMs are like, well, fuck that player then. I don't want to play with them. I'm like, or you could just talk to them. And if you realize that you can't play together, be adults and just go your separate ways. You don't need to do all this hemming and hawing and jumping about and pointing fingers and sending angels and demons and gods and mutants all after this one dude. What you could do is sit him down like a human, right? Dare I say, go up to them and be like, hey man, you can't keep chewing on baby bones. And he'll be like, well, that's my favorite thing. And he's like, well, if it's your favorite thing, maybe this campaign isn't for you. And he's like, why? And he's like, because we don't like chewing on infants. And he goes, you know what? I think I will go somewhere else with my homicidal rage. Yeah. But that's what I'm getting at. What you did is, I think, a very mature and probably proper way to handle it. What I've seen and what I did once when I first started out years ago is something that is, I think, an easy inclination to make. It's just an easy temptation. People can fall into that pretty easily. And the reason why they can fall into that is because, again, the power trip of being actual God in a world.
Yeah.
I think that in and of itself is able to really stick home for people, that they can do whatever the fuck they want.
Mm-hmm.
So talking and communication, which I feel like we say every episode.
Right.
It's the way to go. It is.
I mean,
it
it's a game about communication.
It absolutely is. It's the one nerd activity that you have to talk to people about. Like, that's just the bottom line.
Yep.
You can't do it alone in your underwear. And if you do it alone in your underwear, it's called a book.
Right.
Go home. And part of it too is you don't want those kinds of people in your game. Some people are just so anti those people. But what if the player is actually really chill and he just, has occasionally killed a shopkeeper here and there?
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
They may not even realize that it's being all that disruptive. I've seen players, like quote unquote problem players, that when it's like, hey man, like this thing that you're doing, like, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but it's, causing this person to not have as much fun. Yeah. The person was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize. And like was super apologetic and didn't even know. Right. And it was just like their concept of how to play the game. And no one had told them to that point, like, hey, you probably shouldn't do that. Right.
Right.
I find that happens with, murder hobos a lot, frankly.
Well, I have one player in my most recent campaign that I mentioned I was going to jump on. And when he hears this, I don't know what he'll say. but a while ago, he jumped in and he had told me flat out, session 0, I'm playing a much more chaotic character. And I appreciated that.
Sure.
Because he's one to have like a wide variety of characters that he likes to go through.
Sure.
And he's been chaotic things. I've seen him play more neutral things. So it's not really a big deal. But at least this time he said, hey, I'm going to be doing this. Right.
Right.
And we had a couple of sessions and he was, chaotic. And he even threatened a few NPCs. And it made sense for his character. And I think everybody was fine with it, despite the fact the rest of the party was playing skis bags. Like they're con men. They're all con men. And one of them was just way more chaotic. But one time when they were going to a tavern, he's playing a character, he's playing a race that, let's say this tavern isn't so cool with, considering this is a farming village out in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And the tavern one, who's this old woman, says, go away. Right.
Right.
You're scaring me. You're really scary. I'm an old racist lady. Which is enough for his chaotic character to get provoked and demand a hug from her.
Yeah.
So she goes, no, you don't have a hug for me. I don't want to hug you. So he hugs her. She pulls out a little dagger and shanks him. He goes, I'm going to the police. Now,
fair.
This whole thing became a big hullabaloo, and then he was plotting to kill her, and he was trying to get it back into the tavern to kill her.
Oh my.
And it really turned the session towards how do we handle our one party member who did this really murder hobo-ish thing.
Hobie.
A little Hopi thing, a little murder hobo-ish thing.
Yep.
And how do we redirect that? And I think after the session, he got enough people calling him, hey, man, that was kind of murder hobo-y. Like, hey, man, that was a little out of nowhere. Like, why would you? That's weird. And I know in his head, it was like, no, I'm not a murder hobo. It was a bit, my friend. But I think there was enough people who teased him for it that he realized, and my party's really chill. So there wasn't like a, oh, my God, everything's derailed. My campaign is absolutely just derailments on derailments. They can't finish a side quest.
I'm sorry.
They're hilarious. Literally halfway through one side quest, they literally just said, we're not doing this. They literally just were tired. They literally got tired and went home. And by the way, someone's life was on the line. It was a lot. And they just said, you know what?
It's not worth it.
They're bad people. Their characters are. The players are lovely, but the characters are hideous.
There's a very long list of dead people, and it's all our fault.
Oh, man.
They were trying to fix it. It's just all going out of order. Sorry.
And he decided to spin it, though. And I thought the spin was actually nice. The spin essentially was his character is trying to grow a conscience from this action. And the campaign we call it #debate club, because the main characters of this campaign essentially constantly argue with everyone they meet, including each other. Like they just argue, and they try to convince
hobos.
Yeah, they just try to convince people of bullshit like constantly, and they'll blow into town, and they're just like, "What do you mean you can't let me have all these pineapples?" Well, my God says that pineapples are special. Oh, what's that? I need to marry your daughter to get these pineapples? How about instead? And it's like this huge like con man argument, debate, yada 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 thing.
Oh,
I love them, but it's ridiculous. And on top of that, though, when they deal with other NPCs and they're doing wild and funny things, you have this one more chaotic character who has the chaotic take on it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I actually think it adds to the party as a whole.
Yeah.
But I think this one time it was like, hey, man, for our derailments, that was a big derailment.
Right.
And that was Murder Hobo-y. And, you tease him. And now he's trying to get it into a debate. So I think 2 sessions ago, when he was walking with the rest of the characters, there's a lot of traveling in my campaigns. They just started arguing, and arguing about the ethics of, killing an old woman.
Right.
and it was hilarious. And it was so funny because they had been arguing with themselves so much that they didn't notice a gnoll raid had surrounded them. Like they were so focused on just having this one out that gnolls surrounded them. And they're such a high level at this point that gnolls they're a threat in a lot of numbers. Right. Case in point, just this past session, actually the Editor Goblin's character, Berg passed away tragically, being gnawed on by gnolls.
No, not Berg Ferger.
Yes, the guppy salesman. But right now they are in a dramatic rush to save his life. I actually really like the idea of them all rallying around their little guppy salesman, who is kind of the beating heart of this party a little bit. Not necessarily the brain or the brawn, but kind of the cheeky one that everybody liked. And I don't know if there would be this much of a rush to save him if it was any other character.
Wait,
all the other characters have
quick question,
like clicks between them. Yeah.
Is he a guppy salesman or is he a guppy salesman?
He sells guppies.
Okay.
He has a little New Zealand accent, and he sells guppies, and he's a halfling, and he's Berg Ferger. He's adorable, and everybody likes him. And it's funny to see, especially when you're dealing with a party like that, who is so, I don't know how else to say it, so uncaring for others and so selfish. They're not bad. They're just selfish.
Yeah.
They're selfish people.
Yeah.
And to have all of them just go, we all like Berg.
Right.
We're all going to save Berg's life. And there were even players who missed that session who are just like, oh no, well, it's a good thing that my character is coming along with you guys because I will save Berg too. And there's this huge, I guess you might say rallying cry between the party. And when I look at the other characters in this party, I don't know if they would get this kind of reception because there's cliques and divides in the party, and some party members like other party members more or less, but everybody likes the guppy guy. Of course, he's the guppy guy. You got to save his life. So now there's this mad rush up to this one priest that they know can resurrect him. And they're basically racing against the clock because they want to preserve his body. They don't want decay. They only have a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And now a green dragon is following them. So that's fun.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I just, why make it easy on them? That seems silly. And probably my favorite bit of this whole entire thing, that person who is normally, as I've earlier described as Murder Hobo-ish, had a close relationship to Berg, or more or less he loves Berg, and then Berg was very, I don't like you. Yeah, because you want to murder an old woman. but when Berg was viciously ripped apart by gnolls, because I'm like that as a DM, they went into a gnoll war camp. It's a long story, but long story short, they killed all the gnolls, but the gnolls got Berg, and gnolls are not ones you wish to die to. It's a very vicious death. Right. There's a lot of cutting and ripping and clawing, and he lost a hand, and very dramatic. And this former hobo was the one who did the dramatic rush to the man's body, picks him up, slapping him, trying to get him awake, do the dramatic crying thing, worried, how do we save him? We need to save him. That was his role in that. Right. So with a little bit of push and a little bit of help from other party members and just talking and being like, hey, and maybe just catching it when it happens. I think the worst thing you can do is if you're a party that is not normally player DM, doesn't matter. If you're a party that doesn't really do the, let's go kill the orphanage, like if you're not like that, I think you need to, I guess, just when it happens, just be like, hey, what the fuck? What's going on? And just not maybe what the fuck, but just, hey, what's going on with this? Why'd this happen? Right. I think is a better way to handle the actual act of it than just condemnation, or on worse, just letting it kind of fester there and let everyone being hot and bothered by it. Yeah. There's a way to walk that line.
Absolutely. And I think that it is not a situation where murder hobos are this curse, right? And they're this unchangeable thing, and they're not people anymore. They're just a title, murder hobos, right?
They're not a plague.
Murder hobos are people just like you and me. Any one of us can be murder hobos if we really wanted to be.
If you cut them, do they not bleed?
Right. So it's really a matter, I think, of setting good expectations at the beginning of your game of like what you're kind of expecting, what you want to do, and also making sure that everyone's having fun, right? It's like, okay, you don't really like role playing, but you like combat. How about I make sure that every session that there's some sort of combat that we can play, or an opportunity for combat? And what can I do to help make like the social interactions more fun for you, right?
Right.
And it's just finding ways to do your best to incorporate those people. And if it just doesn't work out for them, it's perfectly okay if they need to go to a different group or not playing your game. That's also a perfectly fine thing to have happen. It sucks, but I've had people that are just like, I just don't jive with your playing style.
Right.
that they said to me, which is like, I respect that. Like, that's fine.
I mean, everybody wants everyone to love everything they do every time they do it, but that's not how things work.
That's not the real world.
Allowing that adult conversation to go, hey, you and I ain't jiving. I'm not digging this. I think I'm going to dip. Or, hey, is there a way to change this?
I just think we're different people.
Right. We just need to see other people. You're breaking up with each other, essentially. Yeah. Actually, I will say this, though, if I could have just a quick thing.
Absolutely.
Besides the actual session 0, which you should have, right? I think that's the best way to handle things. I also think that there is a template that I use that is helpful to me as a DM.
Ooh.
And I think this will be helpful to other people. As a DM, your goal is to try to be as open and, I guess you might say, as entertaining as possible. You are the entertainment in a weird way. You are the guy presenting the show. You are the muses in Hercules. You are the narrator. You're the guy. You're the one telling the story in a lot of ways. They're telling a story too, but you're the one who actually makes the setting happen.
Right.
And that's most of the story. So you have a big role in that regard.
Yeah.
With that being said, something that I try to do is I try to look at media that encompasses a lot of the things that's related to D&D. One of those things happens to be comic books. I'm a big comic book guy. So something that I've done the last year and a half or so is I try to treat my sessions like comic book issues. And I know that sounds weird in a lot of ways.
Okay.
But comics normally have a cover, a preview that gets people interested. And usually that's the stinger from your last session. Or if it's a session 0, that's the cover.
Yeah.
Then in the book, you usually get dialogue, blah, blah, blah. Mary Jane's getting kidnapped by Kingpin again, or Dr. Octopus has decided to, I don't know, dig up Uncle Ben, something disgusting. Batman is crying about another dead Robin. Who cares?
Aww.
But there's some kind of dialogue and setup. And usually inside the actual comic, there is a fight. Normally comics have a fight or two, right?
Yep.
It doesn't really matter where it goes, but having some kind of combat or suggestion of combat or an option of combat is a good idea.
Yeah.
And not every book has combat, but it's usually a good idea to give them some kind of things to stretch those abilities because players like using them. That's why they have them.
Yeah.
And if it's a role-playing party, make sure to keep it light. It's a combat heavy. Make sure it's a long Avengers fight.
Yeah.
You know your party better than I do.
Yeah.
But there's a fight. And then after the fight, there's a stinger to the next issue to keep you reading. So between all these factors,
I really like that, by the way.
I mean, comics are something that I really care about, strangely enough.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I couldn't tell from the comic books lying around all over your phylactery and everywhere else.
Yeah, you don't want them on the phylactery. It gets all moist.
Yeah.
But when you're actually dealing with a session is trying to kind of do the same thing a comic book is trying to do, which is keep people coming back weekly or every 2 weeks, bi-weekly. Whenever your session's happening, there's a comic that usually does the same amount of runtime.
Yeah.
And while a session is longer and it's interactive and there's a lot of moving parts compared to it, the basic cornerstone of it being built a little bit like a comic book, at least in a story outline perspective, I found very helpful.
Yeah.
And you can, of course, spice it up, spice it down, change it around as much as you want. I'm worried now that I've said my secret that my players are going to start looking at every session now on. Like, there's the stinger. Okay, here's the middle of the middle of the session combat. But it's also that weird bit, though, because you're trying to do that. But on top of that, you also want to make sure that you have some form of, how should I put it? Open world.
Yeah.
So it's trying to somehow marry something as open world as, let's say, an Elder Scrolls game or World of Warcraft. You're trying to marry that huge open world to a format like a book or a comic book. And somewhere in the middle is the actual game. And that's complicated.
Yeah, but at the same time, there is kind of a formula that something like Skyrim does adhere to, in which you walk to certain places and there's certain areas that are just designated on paths and things where you walked into that area and it triggers a random event. And sometimes it's a dude, a farmer walking down like, oh, I'm going to go to Windhelm to join the Stormcloaks. And then sometimes it's a guy who summons a flame atronach and tries to kill you with it. Or it's a bear, or it's a bunch of wolves, or it's, a noble. You can have combats and things kind of prepared and able to throw in there to keep your players, whether they're power gamers or murder hobos or whatever, happy, even when it's still open world.
Right. Like you said, random encounters too. Not everything has to be scripted. And I want to get into like a complete deep dive of DMing philosophy right at the end.
Right.
That seems, well, welcome to the 101 class. Well, first of all, you want to begin with your world building. Here, let me bring it here. Yeah. You start with a map.
We already have an episode on that.
Yeah, of course. By the way, if you're interested in earlier episodes,
all right,
go into our back catalog. I do want to mention something funny, though. Fun fact, our audio sounds like hot dirt in our first couple of episodes. So survive that as best you can.
Yeah.
After that, during episode 5, which I believe is original characters, we have new and improved audio that you hear right now.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in our past work, we have a large catalog of episodes. Not that large, but it's pretty big. It's getting bigger every week. So check that out, of course. Little plug there. But finishing up or kind of roping around back to the actual topic at hand, I think in summarize, treat people like people, even if they're killing people.
Uh-huh.
Is that it? Is that the moral of the story?
I guess so.
Yeah. Because, I mean, that want to be chaotic or do something along those lines where you're stabbing people or killing people or whatever, it does stem from something. And it might be a personality trait or it might be something that they want from the game. And you can uncover that by just being a person and talking to them.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing I want to mention, I did get a little bit of pushback when I was talking about this to a friend of mine, where he goes, well, what if they don't want to talk about it? You guys always talk about communication. What if they don't talk? What if they're silent? Well,
it's a good question.
It is. But in the same way that the cure to obesity or the cure to mental health or the cure to all these things is self-care, and there's actual solutions like eating healthy and exercise, that while these aren't immediate fixes, it's still the thing to do.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So while you might have a person who doesn't want to do that, you might just go, hey, man, here's the open door. Come on in and talk if you can. If you can't, maybe this campaign isn't for you because we're talkers. We like to communicate.
Yeah.
And just still be honest, even if they are a brick wall. And that's kind of their problem. But you, as a grown-ass person, should be able to go somewhere and talk to someone else like an adult.
Yeah.
That's important, in my view.
No, yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. I think when you're looking at communication in the games and everything, it's like, well, what if they don't want to talk? What if they get upset? What if this or that? There's a lot that could happen from those conversations. Absolutely. But just like, as you said, with like weight or mental health or a lot of other things, well, there's solutions for those things. If you're not practicing like good technique with, and in this case, communication and actually talking with people and trying to resolve those things, you're not giving yourself a fighting chance to help make your table better. If you don't talk about things, it won't get better, right? At a baseline.
Bruh.
If you talk about things and things are still a little rough and you have to, work on other solutions, then hey, that's what you have to do. But you have to start talking to people first before anything good is going to happen.
Goku didn't get yoked in a day, my dude.
It's true.
Takes time, takes work.
It's true.
Takes work, takes effort, right? Gotta have a support system. You gotta work hard. You gotta communicate. You gotta eat well. You gotta work out. Be jacked. Actually, can I point this out? No. I'm bringing this up. I want more jacked D&D homeboys. Listen, I get you. Working out sucks. I'm with you. All right, I don't want to do it either.
Yeah.
But if live events ever happen again, or if I can go out into the crowds of the millions of adoring DumpStat fans, and I just see just waves and waves of yoked, just fucking buff bros, dude, I'd love it. That's exactly what I want for Christmas. That would be amazing. The DumpStat crowd is just fucking jacked. Can we start like promoting to bodybuilders? I want that.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do it. Let's like just become the meme where it's like, all the buff bodybuilders like sitting around a computer like, hey man, I recommend the fighter class because, this and that. Well, I like playing a warlock and I want it.
DumpStat is strictly Chad. Actually, no. I want jacked ladies too.
Yeah.
I want beautiful jacked men and women and anybody else non-binary. As long as you just got muscles, you're in.
Yeah.
Are you okay? You sound tired.
We're gonna have a what's the strength hammer bell thing from carnivals? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where you swing the hammer down and you know that?
Nope.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You don't. So it's basically you have a hammer and you go up to a thing and you swing the hammer down on it and the bell, the little ringer goes up to the bell.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have one of those.
I thought you were talking about a show for some reason.
To be a DumpStat fan or to get into one of our events, you have to get a ring on those, and then you have to go over and get grip strength from the Editor Goblin, who just like puts these mitts around your hand and you just gotta grab as hard as you can.
Yeah.
And if you do a certain PSI, you're in.
Yeah.
Oh man, look at the size of that ham hock. Woo!
Basically, if you can break Doc's neck with your index and your thumb, you're in. You're in.
I mean, anyone can do that, though. Let's be real.
No, come on, you're a fighter.
I'm a ranged fighter. Haven't we been over this? My strength is 8. It's 6. I'm pretty sure it's 6. I've got a dexterity of 20.
I do. I'm a ranged fighter. I fight with dexterity. I'm a arcane archer or whatever.
Yeah.
What? You don't like that class?
No, I like it. I just that
was not a ringing endorsement.
Yeah.
It's funny too, just because I hope that when we eventually start throwing out merch, we just start doing a lot of tank tops and fucking workout gear, maybe sweatbands. Ooh, DumpStat sweatbands.
That would be so cool.
Ooh, okay. Well,
really down for that.
To all you murder hobos out there, keep it up, I think is what we're getting.
Right.
Keep it going.
Just talk to your DMs, check in with your players, make sure that you're not like ruining anybody's fun. And if you're not, then great. Keep murder hoboing people. If some people don't like what you're doing, find out how you can make the table a better place and find out how they can make the table a better place for you as well.
Right. That's kind of the lovely, complicated balance of our lives. But social communication, going back and forth, being a person.
Yeah.
Be a person.
It's true.
We are all over Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, iTunes,
YouTube. We gotta get more stuff on YouTube, man. I found the YouTube channel. We've got a few episodes on there, but we don't have that many. And because okay. When you're listening to this, we're probably gonna have everything else up by then. Right. But you're probably gonna see it was all added. Like, why were all of these things added between like 2 and 3 days? Like, their release schedule is nuts. It's like, listen, guys, we didn't know you existed. I'm sorry, but we're making it up for you.
We had no idea.
Yeah, we're making it up to you by just adding a bunch of content for you all at once.
You can find us all on MySpace.
Apparently, we approved of you in a Tito stupor. I apologize. Oh my god, that's hilarious! I feel so bad. And they're so nice. They're so nice.
So nice.
They're so sweet. I love them. Yes, no, absolutely. Go check us out over on YouTube, where we have so much content. We're bursting with videos and comments and subscribers. Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh my god. I feel so nice. And most importantly, share this podcast with people. Share it with moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, friends, relatives, abusers, victims, if you're going by this episode, murderers. with them too. See what they think.
Oh God.
What? I mean, when they're in prison, but not when they're out. If they're out, run away because they're free and they can probably murder more. But when
I think we need to get some more Tito's in you, bud.
I don't like chill boozing it up, Doc.
All right.
It's just like this. It's a very white accountant going, "Hey, let's get lit." No, I'm not interested. Please go away.
Oh boy.
But yeah, share this with people. That really helps us out. Download us, especially on Spotify. Spotify's the big daddy. So if you can help that out as well, that's fantastic. And if you want to suggest what we do next for an episode over on that lovely group that you mentioned earlier, D&D Bedtime Stories, we have polls out a lot. We look at the threads. You can just give us suggestions by just messaging any of our pages. We will most likely look at it. We're those kind of guys. We care about you, unless you say rude things about me that makes me feel bad about myself. And then I probably will definitely respond.
Or about other people.
In any case, make sure you do all those things. Anything else from you, Doc?
I don't think so. It's appreciated as always. We appreciate you guys listening to us and sharing this stuff. It's awesome just seeing our stuff get out there and being able to talk with a lot of new people about D&D stuff. So I love it.
I love it too. All right. Well, thank you again, Docus McBungus, for joining me. I will see you guys all next week.
Yeah. See ya.
Talk to you
on
later.
YouTube.
On YouTube.
Bye.
Take a look at those drumsticks, baby! Woo! Woo!
You've just been listening to DumpStat, a podcast presented by Horizon Kingdoms. Horizon Kingdoms is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition server that's free to play. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and join up on Discord to join in on a new adventure. For more DumpStat, be sure to find us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe.